Somewhere deep in Ukraine, something eerie is happening. Russia's soldiers know it. They've seen it time and time again. As soon as any of their comrades set foot in this one place, they know that the soldier they've just seen enter is on a countdown. They have 12 minutes, just 720 seconds in this terrifying place before the inevitable happens. Death. Russia's soldiers aren't even lasting as long as mayflies in Ukraine right now. They have 12 minutes and counting as soon as they enter this one place. What is that place? Stepnohirsk. Lying a short distance from the banks of the Kinska River and surrounded by the settlements of Lukyanivska and Primorska, Stepnohirsk has become a death trap for Russian soldiers. But it's a trap that Putin keeps on forcing them to enter. Russia's leader has to do that because he sees Stepnohirsk as one of the key pieces of territory Russia must capture if it's to advance north over the Kinska River and in the direction of Zaporizhzhia city. This tiny settlement, which is war-ravaged already, is desolate. No non-combatants remain, only Russian soldiers who creep through the streets, knowing that each step they take forward could be their last. Ukraine's drones are always watching. The country's soldiers lie in ambush, shifting their positions based on what the drones see until they're in the perfect place to strike. This is the reality of Stepnohirsk for Russian soldiers. And as one Ukrainian soldier who goes by the call sign 9 tells The Times, "I reckon the life expectancy of one mobilized Russian here is about 12 minutes, no more, and the cost of his life in terms of shells and FPVs spent to kill him is about $5,000 to $6,000. Let's transplant ourselves into the head of a Russian soldier sent into Stepnohirsk. After trudging for miles through a kill zone just to get here, we'll get to that later in the video, you enter the once peaceful settlement. Before the war, this would have been a nice place to live. At the center of Stepnohirsk are 9 high-rise buildings, and they're surrounded by cottages. A sleepy village of 5,000 sounds idyllic. That's not what you're seeing as you cross the threshold into the settlement. All 9 of those high-rise buildings have been bombed into oblivion. The gorgeous cottages are scorched, and there is no sign of any of the 5,000 people who used to live here. All that remains is an eerie sort of calm. A silence that anybody who's ever been caught in the eye of a hurricane knows is a surefire signal of danger. No birds are chirping, no signs of life anywhere. A shiver runs down your spine, but you know you have to push on. Putin demands it. Suddenly, a sound breaks the silence. The telltale whir of a reconnaissance drone lurking overhead forces you to make a desperate break for whatever scant cover you can find. Just 5 minutes after entering Stepnohirsk, you find yourself hiding behind a wall in the burnt-out remains of a cottage, praying to whatever deity you believe in that you were quick enough to evade Ukraine's drone. You weren't. You just don't know it yet. In a hidden command center, Ukraine's drone operators are already preparing for the delivery of your death. The footage shot by the reconnaissance drone that flew over your head is being beamed back in real time, and you have become nothing more than a blot of heat on a thermal imaging camera. Ukraine's defending forces know exactly where you are, and it will take no more than a few minutes for the whir of the reconnaissance drone to be replaced by that of an FPV strike drone. You hunker down. Each passing minute feels like an hour. Finally, after another 5 minutes have passed, you think that you're safe to move. Wow, just 10 minutes in and you've just had the closest of calls. Well, not quite. As you peek your head over the wall that you believe is your sanctuary, a Ukrainian drone is closing in. Behind you, but you don't even think to look as you scan the Stepnohirsk streets, looking for the next route of advance. By the time you hear the buzzing, it's too late. The drone scores a direct hit, and your light is shut off. You lasted 12 minutes. And Stepnohirsk returns to the eerie silence you once knew, waiting for the next unfortunate Russian soul to enter. This is the fate of so many of the soldiers who enter this new village of death, and for many, it's inevitable. Right now, as it still maintains control over Stepnohirsk, Ukraine has all of the advantages when combating Russia's assault troops. As UKR Inform noted in a January 14th report, where it covered how Russia has been trying to advance into the village, Stepnohirsk is located on high ground. For Russia, that makes the village strategically important. We're going to explain in more detail in a few minutes. But right now, that high ground is working in Ukraine's favor. Positioning its drone and artillery operators on the hills gives Ukraine's forces a clear view of the village and the surrounding areas. High ground also makes it easier for drone operators to fly their reconnaissance and FPV drones, not least because the better signals provided by this type of territory allow those drones to search deeper into the city for any Russian soldier who is stupid enough to enter. In its own analysis, Combat Veteran News adds that water is another issue that Russia's soldiers face. Stepnohirsk, which is about 30 kilometers or about 18.6 miles away from Zaporizhzhia city, combines its high ground with deep lows. It's in a geographically very difficult location, Combat Veteran News says, because this whole region here is partially flooded, and that means that no one can really occupy any region here. So while Ukraine holds the high ground over Stepnohirsk, Russia's forces have to trudge through flooded terrain in freezing cold weather, all in service of achieving nothing more than their own deaths within an average of 12 minutes of entering the village. You have to ask the obvious question, why? We've touched on one of the reasons already, which is that Russia is making a push towards Zaporizhzhia city, or at least it wants to make a push. Standing in Russia's way is the Kinska River. It will need to be crossed, and for that crossing to happen, Russia needs to take as much territory as it can south of that river, so it can establish safe locations for its soldiers to push north. Enter Stepnohirsk, which along with Primorska and Lukyanivska would give Russia the safe space it needs to attempt the Kinska River crossings that bring it closer to Zaporizhzhia city. It's the importance of this particular city that has led to Putin ordering 20,000 soldiers in the direction of Stepnohirsk. By taking the village, Russia gains the high ground, along with a route toward a city that is home to the largest steelworks that Ukraine still has active. Losing Zaporizhzhia would be devastating to Ukraine's military, as Mongol, who is a senior officer who commands the Ferata Group, which is a special forces unit inside Ukraine's military intelligence, tells the Times. The loss of Stepnohirsk would allow the enemy to overcome the natural barrier, advance artillery and unmanned assets, and shell Zaporizhzhia around the clock, Mongol adds, saying. That would cause panic among the civilian population and a humanitarian crisis. It would create the conditions for the occupation of Zaporizhzhia and the loss of the regional center. That mention of artillery has also been pointed out by Combat Veteran News and UKR Inform. While Russia wants to cross the Kinska River, Stepnohirsk is also located just close enough to Zaporizhzhia city to allow Russia's artillery units to begin their shelling before the crossings happen. At the very least, Russia could start shelling the outskirts of the city to set the stage for an attempted occupation, Combat Veteran News says. And again, remember the high ground in and around Stepnohirsk. That's the ideal territory for Russia's drone and artillery crews to set up so they can start bombarding Zaporizhzhia city and, as UKR Inform points out, control over Stepnohirsk would also give Russia the ability to control the logistical routes that lead from Zaporizhzhia and into the settlements of Hulyapola and Orakiv. Mongol also makes mention of Russia wanting to panic civilians. It's another key reason why it's happily sacrificing soldiers to the Stepnohirsk grinder. Before we explore this point, this is the military show, and we bring you the full picture, not just the headlines. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel if you want to stay ahead of the curve. Russia's campaign against Ukraine's civilians isn't a byproduct of its invasion of Ukraine. It's a key strategy, and it's one that Putin has employed to kill 15,172 Ukraine civilians, along with injuring 41,378 more up to January 31st. The shelling of cities that are filled with non-combatants has also been a key part of Russia's strategy, as we have seen all throughout the occupied regions of Ukraine. And as the New Voice of Ukraine reported on February 23rd, Russia has been building on its civilian-focused strategy in 2026. Beyond trying to destroy as much of Ukraine's energy infrastructure as it can using drone strikes that have been ongoing throughout the winter, Russia is now using a combination of sabotage and assassinations to create panic inside Ukraine's cities. The energy grid strike campaign is being shifted to focus on Ukraine's civilian railway infrastructure and supply routes, the New Voice of Ukraine says. And now Russia is sending assassins into Ukraine's cities to actively hunt regional leaders, as we saw with Operation Enigma 2.0, which targeted journalists, public figures, and even key members of Ukraine's intelligence community, such as HUR representative Andriy Yusov. So for Russia, Stepnohirsk is a vital stepping stone. It could lead to the capture of Zaporizhzhia city. And even if it doesn't, it allows Putin to continue his barbaric and terroristic campaign against Ukraine's civilians. These dual goals are what are leading to Russia into making the often suicidal choice to send its soldiers to run the 12-minute gauntlet of death in Stepnohirsk. Stick with us as we'll expose just how far Russia is willing to go and how badly it will hurt itself to take this small settlement. But for now, it's enough to know that Russia sees Stepnohirsk as so important that it isn't sending any old rank-and-file soldiers into the village. Putin is sending the best of the best, and that's a terrible decision. As the Times reports, the Russians have sent 2 paratroop divisions, a motorized rifle division, and a Spetsnaz brigade to the village. These are Russia's elite soldiers, who are lasting an average of 12 minutes in the Stepnohirsk death trap, and that means Russia is losing some of its very best. The question that Putin will happily ignore is, what will Russia have left after? If it somehow manages to take Stepnohirsk, will have churned through some of its best soldiers, which inevitably means it will be left with poorly trained reserves to continue the push into Zaporizhzhia. And this assumes that Russia's elite forces will even be able to take the village. If they can't do the job, the reserves will have to carry on. If Russia's best lasts for 12 minutes, its worst might not even last 12 seconds. For Ukraine, Stepnohirsk is a potentially vulnerable location that has also presented them with an opportunity. Russia is going to send its elite forces to the village. Ukraine can respond in kind by sending its best, and Ukraine's soldiers hold all of the advantages that come with Stepnohirsk that Russia so desperately wants to get its hands on. Granted, Ukraine's soldiers are outnumbered by 7-1, as the Times points out, but many are members of Ukraine's main Directorate of Intelligence, or HUR, and they're being supported by veteran infantry soldiers on the ground, territorial defense units, and drone operators. What it all adds up to is that Ukraine has been able to turn Stepnohirsk into the sort of eerie hellscape that could only have come out of a Russian nightmare, and cleverly, Ukraine isn't rushing in blindly to stop the Russian forces that are trying to take the village. Everything that Ukraine does in Stepnohirsk is calm, careful, and calculated, as an example of one of Ukraine's attacks shared by the Times demonstrates. The outlet says that it's often Mongols' assault team that goes to clear out the Russian infiltrators in Stepnohirsk, and the radio chatter from one such operation highlights his approach. The bad thing is they already know we're coming, Mongol told a squad commander after Ukraine had identified some entrenched infiltrators who had managed to break the 12-minute curse. Right now the enemy is conducting additional recon here. Keep checking constantly whether the enemy is observing and sit like mice, full radio silence. Patience is clearly a virtue for Ukraine in Stepnohirsk, which seems like a strange thing to say given the speed at which it clears out Russian soldiers on average in the village. This tells us that 12 minutes may be a massive overestimate for many of Russia's soldiers. Some are likely lasting a handful of minutes, with those who manage to entrench being the outliers who drive the average up. Regardless, Ukraine has been getting good results with its Stepnohirsk strategy. On February 25th, the Defense Intelligence of Ukraine discussed some of Ukraine's most recent offensive maneuvers in a telegram post. Stepnohirsk now appears to be the domain of Ukraine's elite Artan unit of the HUR, and that unit has managed to push Russia's forces further away from the village. During the operation, carried out under conditions of complex logistics and constant attempts by the enemy to hold positions using the method of meat assaults, the fighters of Artan, in cooperation with other units of the Department of Active Operations of the HUR, of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine, and the Defense Forces of Ukraine, regained control over key positions and significantly improved the tactical situation on the specified section of the front, the telegram post reads. Ukraine destroyed Russian manpower and equipment to the tune of taking out several dozen Russian soldiers. Plus, Ukraine managed to take control over some key logistical arteries that Russia was using to supply its Stepnohirsk forces, which will only weaken the country's assaults in the future. This is the culmination of everything that Ukraine has been doing in Stepnohirsk for months. The 12-minute curse has destroyed Russia's attempts to build a strong assault force, which has provided the opportunity for Ukraine to launch counterattacks. However, there's one more component to those counters that needs to be mentioned: Starlink. No coincidence that Ukraine's HUR operatives chose late February to strike back against the Russian forces trying to take the village. Earlier that month, Elon Musk and SpaceX finally shut down Russia's access to the illicit Starlink terminals that it had been using to coordinate its forces on the front. For the Stepnohirsk invaders, who were already isolated and being hunted by Ukraine, the loss of Starlink served as a death knell. They can no longer justify their suicidal runs into the village because they know that forces behind them aren't able to coordinate and build upon any of the gains they might have made. Does that mean that Russia will stop pushing soldiers towards Stepnohirsk? Not a chance. We told you earlier that we would expose just how far Russia is willing to go to get its hands on Stepnohirsk, and Putin's brutality, which is meted out to his own soldiers almost as much as it is to Ukraine, starts with the approach to the city. As Combat Veteran News points out, Russia's soldiers have to take a dangerous journey from the settlement of Kamyanska before they even reach Stepnohirsk. That journey is about 4 to 5 kilometers, or about 2.5 to 3.1 miles, which most of the soldiers take on foot across open terrain that is a clear kill zone. Imagine Russian troops just simply having to march across these open fields all the way to this contested village. You understand how the attrition can just become absolutely outstanding, Combat Veteran News says. And remember, Russia has dedicated 20,000 soldiers to assaulting the Stepnohirsk direction. The fact that Ukraine is still making gains, even when Russia has such a massive manpower advantage, indicates that what Putin is trying to achieve in Stepnohirsk amounts to little more than sending his soldiers to their inevitable deaths. So what if you're a smart Russian soldier? You know about the 12-minute curse and understand how ridiculous it would be to march toward and into a city that will kill you in minutes. Are you going to say no to being sent on a suicide run into a city that will stand long after you're dead? You might think that you would, but Russia is making sure you can't. On February 24th, the BBC reported on interviews that it conducted with 4 captured Russian soldiers. One of those soldiers told the BBC that he had personally seen a Russian commander who was made a hero of Russia coldly execute soldiers who refused to follow his orders. I see it, just 2 meters, 3 meters, click, clack, bang. This practice of zeroing or killing those who say no is widespread in the Russian military, and it leaves those tasked with taking Stepnohirsk in a no-win situation. They can either last 12 minutes in the village or get shot by their own commanders immediately. Or if they're lucky enough to have a corrupt commander, and let's face it, corruption is like oxygen to the Russian high command, those soldiers can bribe their way. As the Institute for the Study of War reports, some of Russia's soldiers are paying as much as £30,000 or around $40,600 to get out of the suicidal assaults that they're being ordered to undertake. Perhaps there are commanders near Stepnohirsk who are making out like bandits now the village has gained such a terrifying reputation. But for those who can't pay, the clock is ticking. They have 12 minutes before the inevitable comes, and when it does, Stepnohirsk will still be waiting for the next Russian soldier who makes it out of the surrounding kill zone frying pan and into a fire that burns so hot that no Russian occupier can escape from it. What we see now in Stepnohirsk echoes what we also saw in Pokrovsk throughout Russia's assault on that particular city. The Pokrovsk curse ran even more rampant through Russia's army than Stepnohirsk's 12-minute curse, and you can learn all about it if you watch our video. And remember to subscribe to the military if you enjoyed this video and want to see more coverage of the reality that Russia's forces face in Ukraine. And thank you for watching.